knowledge. We've had people talk about how to be able to write CVs. It was a myriad of topics, looking at the threat landscape, looking at threat hunting, ways of exploitation. It was just quite a number of things. I think for me is to sum up this cybersecurity awareness month, give a point or two. And I can see the meeting, okay. Right. It's just to give a point on two based on experience. Yesterday, we also had an opportunity to really rather talk about the cyber workforce. That was courtesy of Cyber in Africa, whereby I think she was also online yesterday. And we talked about nurturing talent, and that's exactly what we are doing in ICRAL under the NTSP program, whereby we're able to get young graduates and mentor them, and now then as well use the transformation upskilling model, and then we let them out in the industry. So to every one of you who has taken time to come up with training content, to come up with, to be a cyber evangelist in a way or the other to the community, I think congratulations to everyone. For us is to keep the ball moving. For us is to keep on talking about cybersecurity, how to be safe online, keep on discussing ways of protecting data, keep on talking about governance, keep on talking about protecting the national data for the country, because that's who we are. And also keep on preaching the good news in terms of cybersecurity. I believe Judy, you're also there, Judy Ngure.
Hi, Sammy,
Judy, you have a very bad connection. You're breaking. Okay, sound problem. All right.
Oh,
Alexis?
Okay. Can you completely not hear me, or?
No, now we can hear you. You are just, there was some sound problem. Do we have Alexis online?
Yeah, I'm online.
Pleasure. Alexis, how are you?
Fine, thanks. And yourself?
I'm well. Pleasure to have you on board as one of the panelists.
Thank you very much.
I think we are really waiting eagerly to hear what you'll have to tell us today. It's such an honor even to have you on board, and welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. Again, really happy to be a part of this. Yeah.
Yes. Pleasure. With your vast experience, I think people will be waiting to hear quite a number of things. As you're a subject matter expert when it comes to penetration testing and a lot of things, I think I've been very keen even to Google and follow you and to see what you've been doing. So pleasure to have you on board.
Thank you very much.
All right, pleasure. Laura Teach, SheHacks co-founder, pleasure as well to have you on board. Brian Obilo, pleasure to have you on board. Judy Gure, pleasure to have you on board. So I think without further ado, in the interest of time, I'd like to welcome all the panelists so that we are able now to continue with today's session. I'll hand it over straight to Brian. Maybe you can take it up.
So I'll just turn on my camera to introduce myself. So my name is Brian Obilo, and first of all, before anything, I just have to say that I'm so happy to be here today because for one, I was a part of cohort 1 of the National Cybersecurity Training Program. And actually that's how I transitioned to cybersecurity from software engineering. And I'm currently a Tech and Society Fellow at Mozilla Foundation. And for the past 1 year, I've been so committed to fostering the operational resilience of civil society organizations by advancing cybersecurity capacity building and promoting cyber awareness and promoting cyber resilience approaches amongst CSO groups. So I think I can pass it on for someone else to introduce themselves, or how does this work, Sam?
Yes, we want every keynote speaker, every panelist to introduce him or herself. Just give a brief about yourself, your experience, where you're coming from. Did you actually uptake cybersecurity on, or it was just a passion that you wanted to follow? So I think we can just use that model. Thank you.
Okay. So I think I've pretty much said it all. Like the National Cybersecurity Training Program is where I received lots of mentorship and training, and I transitioned to cybersecurity from then on. So I went on to work at ICRAL. I think for me, I was always passionate about developing and building more than breaking stuff. So transitioning to cybersecurity at first was very difficult because it was sort of like a mindset change. It took a lot of mindset change to be able to be a decent cybersecurity professional. But yeah, I'm very, very happy to be here. For the past 1 year, I've been working at the intersection, or rather the nexus, of cybersecurity and the civic space, civil society. So we've been trying to support so many local and international civil society organizations, mostly in the global south, so Africa, places like India and Mexico and stuff like that, through Mozilla and Ford Foundation. Yeah.
Pleasure. Thank you very much, Brian. I think let's just move over to Laura. Laura, welcome.
Thank you so much, Sam. It's such an honor to be here with you and my fellow panelists. I think I have worked with each and every one of the panelists in one way or another, and it's always been a pleasure. As Sam has said, my name is Laura. For those who don't know me, Laura Teach. I work in cybersecurity. I'm the co-founder of She Hacks Kenya, which is a community of women hackers in the country with over 400 members and over about 30 clubs in 30 colleges, and also a chapter in Zimbabwe, so it's growing. And I also work at ICRAL Innovation Hub as a cybersecurity trainer, and that is something that I'm very, very passionate about, training. I started in cybersecurity in 2016 after a boot camp by Africa Hackon at my school. I was a third-year student at Daystar at that time. And that's when I got introduced to cybersecurity, and that's when I decided that this is a career I want to take, a career path I want to follow. And from then, I think I was more into network security and also OSINT. But I think I found my niche in training because I enjoy more than anything else sharing knowledge with other people. And so I run a training program at ICRAL Innovation Hub. Besides that, me and Brian work in a similar space because I also work in the intersection of cybersecurity and civil society. And I have been working with journalists, CSOs, and at-risk groups, protecting them from digital threats, providing assistance in terms of training and technical support. And I also work with the Ford Foundation. I'm the Cybersecurity Advisory Board, and we created a cybersecurity assessment tool for such organizations. So I'm also very passionate. Besides community building, I'm very passionate about digital security, especially for at-risk people and communities. And yeah, it's an honor to be here. I can pass it over to Judy.
Thank you, Laura. I hope I'm audible enough for everybody. If not, please let me know. So my name is Judy Ngure. I am a lead cybersecurity engineer at Africa's Talking. So Africa's Talking is a Pan-African company that enables developers to build onto different areas of technology like SMS, how to create security into products. I think for most people who know me have known me through bug bounty. Ideally, my space has just been around application security, and I'd say it's an industry I'm very proud to be in. I've been in this for almost over years now. activity. And lately we've been building the threat landscape for Africa for using Africa stocking, and that's in terms of building security into products depending on what languages they're running, and especially in API development. And actually about to start a new role on Monday on the same job. I'm actually excited, and then I've also been a consultant for a number of companies. I think that's when I've realized, I actually love what I do, and especially in terms of building into companies and building into products, and trying to figure out, the one niche in application security that has not been met by bug bounty or tools, and that's usually my everyday job. I've also been a part of different communities since I joined the industry. That was in 2018 after school, and I'd say I'm actually excited to be here today, and I hope I can share as much knowledge as I can in the different areas. Thank you. I pass it over.
Alexis?
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here. So I'm a penetration tester and red teamer by trade. I currently work as a senior penetration tester for Hackersploit, and I've been working in cybersecurity for the last 6 years. So I'll just give you a little bit of a background as to what Hackersploit is and what we do. Hackersploit is a cybersecurity consultancy firm that offers penetration testing and red teaming services to small and medium-sized businesses, as well as security audits for companies that have to adhere to security policies and various and have to adhere to various security policies, as well as compliance standards. So, for example, banks and financial institutions. So that's just a basic background as to what Hackersploit does. In regards to sort of the community outreach that we have with Hackersploit, as you may already know, we have a YouTube channel, and as part of our strategy, or cybersecurity strategy, we hope to improve the skills of penetration testers as well as employees by providing free training on our YouTube channel, either on the offensive and the defensive side of things. We also provide cybersecurity awareness training to employees of the companies that we perform penetration tests for, so that we essentially improve the overall security posture of the company, in addition to providing them with data regarding their current attack surface and the vulnerabilities that are exposed to. So that's basically what I do and what Hackersploit does.
Okay, thank you very much, Alexis. I think we are trying to keep in line with the time. I think the program says we are supposed to be doing the keynote and the introductions of the panelists and within 20 minutes. So thank you very much, the panelists. I think without further much ado, we'd like to go to the next step, whereby we want to do a small overview. One, in terms of cybersecurity careers, how we handle our cybersecurity careers every day in life. So day to day, what do we do different? What do you think you've really added in this cybersecurity landscape, taking into the account of the pre and post-COVID? So that basically brings us to the second point, the cybersecurity landscape before, how it was, and now how it is after the pandemic. I think I would like to follow the same trait, just ask each speaker, starting with Brian. Just tell us how your cybersecurity career has been in your day-to-day life, as well as just try and explain to us what do you think, how it was before COVID and how it is after the pandemic. Welcome, Brian.
Thanks a lot, Sam. Before I even begin, I have to also add that I also have been doing lots of work on disinformation and platforms accountability. And we recently conducted a research titled Inside the Shadowy World of Disinformation for Hire in Kenya. And we sort of focused on how malicious campaigners and paid mercenaries were sort of hijacking Twitter's trending algorithm to spread information to unsuspecting Kenyans. But thanks again for giving me a chance to speak. So as I had initially mentioned, I'm currently a Tech and Society Fellow, and I think I've been working at the intersection of the civic space and cybersecurity for a year now. And I can only speak from the perspective of what I've seen, especially from the field with regards to how civil society, the landscape has changed for civil society sort of like organizations. So first of all, these civil society organizations around the world right now, thanks to the pandemic, were sort of forced to leverage the benefits of digital technologies in their social justice work. But there have been new challenges because the fact that they've been having all these new forms of connection and collective possibilities thanks to more, technological adoption. These digital technologies have sort of opened a new world of risks and vulnerabilities, and it sort of changed how we used to approach problems for these risks and threats for civil society organizations. So for example, one trend that I've been seeing and tracking and researching on for like the past 1 year is how civil society organizations across the global south and with the main focus of Africa have been increasingly facing digital surveillance, censorship, harassment, and disinformation in a way that sort of makes their work not only difficult, but sometimes even dangerous. And also just conducting research around the decline of internet freedom across Africa. Because one thing we saw is how the pandemic absolutely accelerated the decline in internet freedom. And we have seen lots of digital repression by governments. We've seen lots of censorship during the time of COVID. And we've also seen some other governments sort of expanding their surveillance powers and embracing more of their cyber sovereignty. So these are some of the problems I've been trying to tackle and work on a day-to-day basis. And one of our most recent research and guides was on how to protect yourself from spyware such as Pegasus, because this is one that has affected, I think, tens of thousands, if not tens of thousands of journalists and human rights activists, and in some instances, even government officials in, I think, over 50 countries. And it's been crazy because this is a very sophisticated spyware that can turn your device into a 24-hour surveillance device. So people can see your messages, they can harvest your photos, they can record your calls, they can activate the microphone to record conversations. And we've actually been working with some activists who have been infected with products such as these ones to sort of improve them. So part of the job is also to just conduct like cybersecurity research and provide solutions and recommendations to these kinds of problems. So the work is just it's pretty dynamic, and I just go with the flow. So sometimes we may be coding, sometimes we may be doing data engineering when we're doing lots of work on this information. And sometimes we just do the basic work where it's just the normal penetration testing and reporting work. So yeah.
Thank you, Brian. You mentioned some three interesting points there. Maybe to the audience, and I believe everyone is keenly following. You mentioned about one, digital repression. Two, you've noticed a lot of censorship. And three, you talked about internet freedom. So how would you compare these 3 points, pre and post-COVID in depth, especially when it comes to about digital repression?
So thanks for the question, Sam. I think I have to clarify as well that the pandemic itself did not create this internet freedom crisis. But what we sort of realized is that with the pandemic, what the pandemic has actually done is that it has created conditions that authoritarian governments have sort of manipulated to sort of ratchet and impose the strategies into sort of like a stronger position. So yeah, so on that level, it's very hard to break it down on how exactly COVID has done this, but we've been seeing lots of internet censorship, and like for example, Nigeria have actually still banned Twitter. We have been seeing lots of repression online. We've been seeing how the civic space and these spaces have been minimized by governments through repression, and also tracking and quelling incidents, dissidents of these regimes as well. So, yeah.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. I think we go next to Laura.
Thanks so much, Sam. Brian has spoken so well because, as I said, we work in the same space, and we've seen a lot of the threats that have been amplified during the COVID pandemic, not just in Kenya, but all over the globe. We get requests from, recently we got requests from organizations, civil society organizations in Ghana. We have some in America, Canada, just reaching out to us and trying to seek help in terms of providing digital security for them. So one of the things that has changed in the pre or post-COVID period compared to the pre-COVID period is the conversations around cybersecurity. I feel like people were forced to move into the digital world. People are forced to move into working remotely. And with that comes more, or rather not more threats, but amplified threats. So there, people are forced, organizations were forced to have conversations around cybersecurity. And we see that a lot. In terms of the trainings we've had in the past year, that was from April 2020 till now, the trainings we have with organizations, both civil society or otherwise. And we also see not just organizations, but also individuals and children. Nowadays we have, because children are forced to go into remote learning, we've got parents coming to us and talking to us about trying to provide solutions or trying to provide tips and tricks for their kids when they're accessing online platforms for learning. And we've been able to do that. So you see that as much as it has been a curse, the pandemic has been a curse. Initially, we were really trying to drive the conversation around cybersecurity, but I feel like the pandemic is a blessing in disguise because it forced people to have these conversations, and not just companies, but also individuals, parents and their children, also teachers, educators. So there's a lot more conversation compared to before March 2020. There's a lot more conversation happening around cybersecurity. But we also see one other thing that has changed is the skills gap is slowly closing, very slowly, but it's closing. And why is this? It's because initially we used to do like boot camps because we try and upskill students and upskill entry-level professionals. So we're trying to provide or facilitate boot camps for this enthusiasts. And before COVID, it was physical boot camps, and we didn't host as many as we wanted. But now, because of the pandemic, we moved all our trainings to online platforms. So this leaves, this makes it possible for more learning to happen because more students are tuning in every week. There's a boot camp. If Alexis posts a video, people have time to go watch it, to follow whatever he's training on. So I feel like we are encouraging, because of the pandemic and the fact that people have been forced to even do online learning. They have more time to gain, to access resources in terms of cybersecurity, to access training. And so we're getting more and more people getting into the cybersecurity space. So I think that's a blessing in disguise.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you very much. Judy, we'd like to give you this opportunity as well.
Sure, thank you so much, Sam. And I think my counterparts have covered a lot, especially on the social space. And I think I'm gonna speak on a perspective of the product area when it comes to the especially if you're in Kenya, there's a lot of digital transformation. This is where companies try to move a lot of their daily operations onto technological areas or building apps for this, and this is usually this has become very, very common, and I think we can see that in our space. But with this also comes, with great products comes great cybersecurity risks. And with COVID, apart from my 9 to 5 timelines being totally messed up because of elevated or more cyber attacks happening on these products, there are things that have been they were under the microscope. Now we can actually see them in broad daylight. And in terms of what I've seen mostly is attackers have become very specific on where they want to, on where they target, that is. So you'd see, companies that probably they had 2 or 3 issues now and then. Now it seems that, the attacks have moved from being just a nuisance to actually bringing business operations down. And this is because, with the COVID, we had people who lost their jobs. We had people who were at home. People had a lot of free time on their hand. So people, hackers got to, explore or just tinker a lot of applications and see what we can get out of this. What can I, leverage on this application? Do these guys take security as seriously as they should? If not, how can I actually make money of this? And I think that's the biggest challenge I have seen, with the COVID, is the fact that most of my clients have become, targets, actual targeted, companies with the products, as the products themselves become leveraged to, to attackers to make even more money, or, also try to bring business down. And I think these are what these cyber threats, these are intelligence threat hunting had started becoming more and more common. And I think most people have gone into that space because of the targeted security attacks to companies and products. And then, also companies, especially those in the technology space, which is where mostly I work with, they're very keen to be compliant because of, they want, now it's a COVID era where, you can actually, leverage on being in other companies, have guys work remotely in other companies. So, but then for me to work in this country, for me to work in this area, I need to be compliant. And, as much as security is an area that I need to focus on, and that's building security into the products that I'm selling into these other countries. Am I also business capable? Am I compliant with this country to actually be able to handle data security for their people? And I think that has also come out as a need, it has become more of a need rather than a requirement. And it's like, we need this for you to actually operate. So security has become the first level of business need. So now that you can actually sit in a boardroom, and where guys are very interested to know, we are planning to move our product into, let's say, Nigerian market, what do we need to have in terms of security? So these conversations have become more candid, and I like and I actually agree with Laura, security has become now, it became a good thing for guys in security, because now it became a need for businesses to operate. It became a need to actually have a product being used by users. It became a need to have data security. Why are you in our country? Okay, how are you protecting our users? How are you protecting our data? And I think all this came with the big five companies, Facebook now known as Meta or something, being the reason behind why, companies or governments are interested to know, are you compliant? What security measures do you have? And I actually, honestly, I think COVID was a blessing in disguise for guys in cybersecurity. Thank you, Sam.
Pleasure, Alexis.
Thank you very much. So I think I'll sort of go through some of the trends that I've seen in cybersecurity, especially during and now, going on to post-pandemic. So based on the work that we do and the companies that we work with, we have primarily been focusing on essentially monitoring the various APT groups and taking a look at the trends associated with data breaches and the attacks that we've seen over the last 2 years. So I think some of the biggest trends that we've seen during the pandemic as opposed to before was number one, the increased adoption of cloud services by companies, and the fact that companies, as a result of remote work, had to begin migrating their data and files to cloud storage providers, so Dropbox, Google Drive, etc. So of course that immediately increases the security or attack surface, primarily because data can now be compromised or accessed through one Google account. If an attacker is able to successfully perform social engineering or gain access to a Google account with access to those files, or any other account for that matter, then companies' data could easily be accessed or breached for that matter. So that's one of the trends that we've noticed. The second interesting trend that we've seen is that adversaries are now targeting collaboration and remote work platforms. So think of tools like Zoom, Google Drive, Discord, etc. So I've seen a lot of a huge switch in terms of adversary attacks in regards to these platforms being attacked. And there's multiple ways we've actually seen this. Number one is through accounts and social engineering. So attackers essentially trying to gain credentials that way. Furthermore, as we've seen over the last 1 year, we've had an increase in supply chain attacks. So we've seen adversaries essentially creating malicious versions of legitimate applications. For example, the Zoom installer, and then having that delivered to a company or employees for a particular company. And of course, once they install it, their systems get compromised, and it's pretty much the end at that point. So that's the second trend that we've been able to identify, and one that's really increasing. And then, of course, as companies begin to move into the cloud and adopt remote work solutions, as well as migrate the infrastructure like mail servers and any other type of infrastructure that they would typically have servers on site for, they're now migrating that to the cloud or cloud providers like AWS or Microsoft Azure. So we've also started seeing that attackers are now targeting these cloud platforms and platforms like AWS. We've seen a lot of companies implement S3 buckets for data storage and essentially sharing static content either for within employees or even publicly. And we've seen a lot of attacks on S3 buckets. So attackers are sort of leveraging or adapting to the change in regards to what employees have begun using, as well as the employers themselves, and they're essentially finding really intricate ways of attacking these platforms and furthermore the employees. So just to touch upon the threats that we've identified that target employees specifically, we've of course seen an increased prevalence of phishing and social engineering, and in our case, especially in Kenya, We've seen a lot of banks have this problem where their clients and individuals who have accounts with a particular bank have received really legitimate looking emails that of course get them to hand over their credentials. And so we've essentially started working with companies to provide to provide social engineering training to companies, and also helping employees identify a phishing email, helping clients and customers identify phishing emails, so on and so forth. Sort of the final trend that we've actually seen is ransomware, of course, as we know, and that was something that was prevalent before, but I think the method of delivery has changed significantly now, as and this comes back to the whole supply chain attacks, in that attackers or adversaries are now targeting companies with or through supply chain attacks, and they'll typically try and embed or inject ransomware into legitimate programs and applications, and then of course find a way of distributing those applications to the employees of a particular company. And in many cases, if it is ransomware, then a company may be in a very precarious position, especially if they don't have backups, etc. So just to end off what I've been talking about, I'll just sort of cover what we have been trying to do in regards to helping companies deal with the evolved threat that they're facing now. So one of the ways that we've been trying to improve this is by providing cybersecurity awareness training to employees and companies. So helping companies create new security policies that are in line with remote work. And then, of course, helping them set up email security, via DKIM, so that they can prevent phishing, or rather spoofing of emails, and reduce social engineering attacks. And then, of course, helping companies set up a vulnerability management program that is in line with remote works, so that they essentially have an idea of the vulnerabilities that affect their company, their solutions, third-party solutions that they're using, and their cloud infrastructure. So I think we have seen a lot of change in regards to what attackers have started, or what adversaries have started attacking. Their means of attack and their delivery has also changed. And I think that that companies are really starting to take security seriously in regards to having a very well worked out security policy. And I think as some of the previous panelists have said, that it's had an overall improvement for companies in regards to the way they handle security. So yeah.
All right, thank you very much, Alexis. I think we wanted to have, first of all, an interactive panel. At this particular point in time, I think we've had, it has been a whole month of listening to different content. Week one, we discussed about being cyber smart. Week two, we looked at fighting the fish, so all about phishing. We also explored, we experienced, we shared a lot of cybersecurity content. And now, as we close towards the Cybersecurity Awareness Month, I would like to hand over to none other than our champion and our organizer, Shane Jogu. You're online?
Yes, I am.
I think you
Sorry
might want
that.
to mute. Yeah. So
thank you.
yeah,
Good
thank
morning,
you.
everyone. Thank you for joining us for our last session during this month of the Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And if you're new here or don't know what we have been talking about, we're just basically talking about cybersecurity, creating awareness, and not just creating awareness around cybersecurity, but also around the cyber careers that are available for our upcoming young professionals. A lot has been said. Of course, it is an honor to host such an esteemed panel, well versed in different areas of cybersecurity and with different experiences. Just maybe to start us off, it seems that now security, or rather previously security used to be an inconvenience, but now it is a necessity all the time. And we have already discussed what the cybersecurity landscape is pre and post-COVID. I mean, it's been about 2 years now. But just maybe to touch on what we have been, or what the panelists have touched on, is the need for awareness, how the threat landscape has really changed, and how we can best be prepared for some of these eventualities. As you know, cyber attack is always around the corner. So maybe just to Brian, if I could start with you, do you think that the pandemic has made it difficult for people transitioning into cybersecurity careers?
That's actually a very difficult question to ask, because I actually made a transition during the pandemic period. But I definitely think that for sure it has definitely made it very hard for people transitioning into a cybersecurity career, because in some instances we have seen how businesses have been impacted by the pandemic, which essentially just means that they were not in a position to essentially recruit like the old times. And in the context of civil society organizations, for example, the fact that they could not carry out their activities at full capacity meant that they were receiving much less funding than they were sort of used to. So what does this mean? This essentially means that these civil society organizations are in a position where they have very little capacity to defend themselves against cybersecurity threats. Why? Because they're sort of unable, they sort of have inadequate funding to recruit or even retain cybersecurity talent who can sort of help them respond or mediate or remediate when they're experiencing cyber attacks. So judging by this context alone, it could have been very difficult for someone trying to transition into the intersection of cybersecurity and civil society to sort of get in, because adequate funding means less facilities to be able to recruit cybersecurity talent. Yeah.
Judy, you had mentioned something about remote working. Could you just touch on that as well?
Sure. Okay. So I think the remote working has opened a whole new kind of worms, and the people didn't actually understand what it is to work remotely and what exactly the security implications of this are. I think people had to go back, or most companies had to go back to the drawing board and just try to realize, with remote working comes these new problems that we need to solve. And I think this is something that will actually go on for a very, very long time. And I actually know somebody who actually transitioned from being a full-time, somebody who does VAPTs full-time, to actually setting up remote working policies, environments for companies, because it became a very big need for companies. And the fact that even with COVID, slowly disappearing from especially first world countries, they're still going to keep the remote work as part of the company policies. So this is not ideally going anywhere. It's just that new things need to be implemented. New technologies need to be entered into. People need to start learning how to use or to work remotely. And I think I remember there's the very first few months of remote working, Zoom went down, but still they had, I think, 1,000% increase in sales because the need came, but then they were not ready for it. And I don't think anybody was ready for COVID, especially guys in the technology industry, those who do digital transformation, those who are getting into digital transformation. So with the remote working, I think it also opens up more opportunities, especially in a country like this, where security has not been such a big thing that guys were looking into. And now that each company is looking to get somebody into security, especially I think majority of companies in Kenya are at a zero maturity rate when it comes to security, and they're looking for somebody to start them off. And when you get a senior person to start you off, and then you start to understand where your gaps are, and you start to plant or bring people on board to be able to build security for companies. So the remote working and the security part of it, you can get this open up now people to other countries or other areas where they can actually work and build security. And also I think the fact that Kenya being what it is when it comes to technology, people are looking into working here, and the fact that there are remote opportunities and remote has become the new norm, the talent needs to scale. The talent is something that is it becomes a keen thing to look at for companies while they are getting or hiring for this role. Yes, we might close the gap, the cybersecurity gap, with this, and I think this is a very good thing. But remember now, this opens up, competition, and we've seen that with the new Microsoft hire, the 500 developers. I think there's a conversation that's just going on everywhere. Every tabloid I see, there's something about the fact that they get the payment or the terms of working with them is better than what Kenyan companies are offering them. And that's why it's very easy to get them, because you get to give them 3-4 times the salaries. But then what they're poaching for is talent. And it's the same for cybersecurity. The same kind of talent is what people are looking into getting into Kenya, where there's some kind of maturity when it comes to cybersecurity. And the fact that remote work is a new thing now, it becomes very easy to get or to start working with international guys or guys from here working outside to leverage on security. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Judy. Definitely need to leverage on security. Alexis, do you have something to add onto this as a trainer?
Yeah, so I think just touching upon the previous questions, and I'll start off firstly with the cybersecurity careers, and so sort of what we've seen during the pandemic. I think as Brian pointed out, there's been a huge issue, primarily because companies have been financially impacted, and as a result, they aren't able to recruit security members or increase the amount of members or employees within the security teams. And that's on the point of recruitment and actually getting a job in security. But I think as things begin to improve and pick up after the pandemic, that should be something of the past. But of course, it's really difficult to tell at this point. I think from a training standpoint and a certification standpoint, I think that I think things have been made easier, primarily because we've seen a lot of certification providers actually transition or switch up their model in regards to their assessments, and now have started providing students with the ability to take their certifications from home. And we've started seeing big certification bodies like SANS as well as CompTIA now offer their certification exams to students at home, so that they can do it remotely, and they don't really have to be on site or at a testing center. So I think that that's improved. In regards to the to the most or the latest question that essentially highlighted on how remote working has impacted companies' approach to cybersecurity. I think as part of what I've seen in the industry, I think there's been a huge focus on centralization of data, and the reason for that is quite obvious. When you're dealing with a remote work environment and company data, what typically would happen is that a phenomenon called data sprawl, where data is essentially scattered across various platforms and various cloud storage providers, and that's something that companies have been trying to essentially reduce and trying to centralize. So companies have started now utilizing a single or centralized point of storage for data, and then of course using or essentially setting up a system of controlling who has access to that data. But I think generally speaking, in regards to companies, I think it's been quite a positive thing, primarily because given the types of threats that companies are now facing, and the impacts on the platforms that they're utilizing, I think companies have started taking security seriously and are even becoming proactive, if I can say that. And of course, this has led them to adopt security policies that are in line with remote working, as I pointed out earlier. And where we've started seeing companies conduct regular assessments, security audits, etc. Secondly, provide cybersecurity awareness training to the employees so that they can again prevent phishing attacks and social engineering attacks. And we've also seen companies take backup and encryption really seriously. In that, with the rise of ransomware attacks, companies, they're essentially aware of the fact that you really can't prevent a ransomware attack. The only way you can mitigate against it is by having, regular backups and, regular redundant backups, so that you can, easily restore all the data if that is ever at risk. So I think it's had a net positive in regards to how companies approach security, how they, then implement or incorporate security into their business operations, and furthermore, the various protection mechanisms that they've begun setting up, like, as I said, ransomware protection in the form of backups and encryption. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Alexis. Laura?
I think the panelists have covered a lot of the points. The question of if the pandemic has made it difficult for people transitioning into a cyber security career, I think yes and no. Yes, because as they all said, a lot of companies experienced some financial difficulties during the COVID period, and that forced them to choose between maybe their day-to-day work and focusing on their cybersecurity, and they had to prioritize. So you get that a lot of people were laid off, and this is especially true for developing countries. But what it also did is it opened up the world to the world, because companies from abroad, they would seek talent from everywhere else in the world. We got Kenyans finding consultancy jobs, remote gigs for foreign countries that are based, let's say, in developed countries. So yes, as they said, it did make it difficult, but it also opened us to the rest of the world. But I'm going to speak from the perspective, as you said, we offer training as she had. So I'm going to speak from the perspective of students. We try to make them ready or prepare them for the work life. We try to get them ready for the job market. And as much as we are able to get more traction, we're able to get, I'm so sorry for the noise, there's a lot of construction going on here. So as much as, we are getting more students joining our weekly boot camps, twice a week actually. What this does is, because it's online, it shuts out a big demographic of students from rural areas, where initially we used to travel to outside of Nairobi, all the 8 regions of Kenya, to try and conduct our boot camps in different colleges. Now we have a big demographic of students who maybe have no access to the internet when they're home, because during that time schools were shut down. So they have no access to internet. They may not have access to electricity. So as much as we're having boot camps for these other students, there's a big number of other students out there who can't be able to join. And so we are shutting them out. And this makes it difficult to bring more people into the job market, because now we have a situation where only a few favored ones can get access to these resources, get access to these trainings, and then there's the rest who have to wait for the pandemic to end to catch up with the rest of them. So it has made it difficult for, I don't know if the right time is transitioning, but for us, people like us, to get these students ready for the job market.
Awesome, Laura. Applaud you for what you're doing at SheHacks, the trainings, sent to Hackerslight. Now, just moving to the next question, which is how working from home has impacted companies' approach to cybersecurity. I know we've mentioned some of this, but then could you also share some of the cybersecurity policies that have impacted employees now that we are going remote? Brian, maybe I could start with you.
Thanks, Shay. So I think to answer your question, so how have, from what I've seen in the field, like how have organizations been coping with COVID and working from home, for example, is that these days I've been seeing, and we've been recommending that organizations provide cybersecurity training focused on the potential threats of working from home. Because we realize that most organizations are essentially not able to offer this training before they release their employees to work from home. So it essentially left employees, millions of employees, millions of employees on their own to figure out their own cybersecurity. And this was actually such a big challenge. Another thing that we've been trying to get organizations to do more often as a way to adapt is to sort of try and constantly analyze the security and privacy features of the software that are essentially considered necessary for remote working, like, for example, video conferencing apps. So I think Mozilla published a research on that was trying to analyze which is the most secure and private video conferencing app. So constantly doing analysis such as this is very, very important. Also just analyzing like your communication apps, for example. So we had a scenario where organizations, because they were used to sort of constantly collaborating in offices and stuff, so they had to adopt other communication applications such as WhatsApp. So what are the security and privacy implications of that, for example? So carrying out these sorts of analysis is very, very important, especially for organizations. And then another thing we've been trying to get organizations to do is to sort of try and sort of deploy some elements of cybersecurity solutions for their work issue devices, because one thing we realized is that most organizations just give their employees devices, but some of these devices don't have any form of anti-malware or antivirus solutions. So it's very, very important to ensure that you equip not only the employees, but also the devices that the employees use to be able to counter some of these threats that they may be having when it comes to cybersecurity. Yeah, so there's so many other things that I can definitely speak of, such as updating of policies so that you're able to capture new policies, for example, that could potentially impact like the employees of certain organizations. Like I know one that was one of the most impacted elements of cybersecurity for organizations during the pandemic was definitely the aspect of operational security. So our policies around operational security, such as the internal risks, staff training, travel security, for example, like you had to update your travel security policies with the pandemic because in some instances you couldn't travel without being vaccinated and stuff like that. We had to sort of update policies on office security, for example, because we had instances where in some organizations, people were going to the offices in shifts. So what did this mean from like a cybersecurity perspective and even just a physical security perspective? So we saw policies being updated on this, on messaging and collaboration. It was very, very vital to sort of update our policies to ensure that at the bare minimum, we're using end-to-end encryption for all aspects of, messaging and collaboration. And also other policies that sort of impacted our employees could also have been around device security, for example. We have seen instances where people are using their own devices to carry out work for the organization, and this could pose all sorts of challenges, yeah? So we saw lots of change in policies around device security and compartmentalization. We saw lots of change in policies around software security as well. And also just data encryption, because one thing that working from home led to is from what we definitely observed from our field is that there was a lot of insecure file sharing. And I know, or I was working for this CSO that actually does a lot of litigation work, and litigation work means lots of paperwork. But they were sharing these files. They weren't even encrypting it, and they were easily sharing it on WhatsApp. So we had to develop policies around data encryption and just data security to ensure that this is sort of catered for. And we also saw changes in policy around like account security that also impacted employees. So we had to sort of create policies if they did not exist before around stuff like updates. So how often would you be like updating your devices now that you're working from home and stuff like that? And also, if you're using any third-party services on any of your devices, do we have any sort of policies that try to govern stuff like this? And then another thing that we were trying to get organizations to adopt more was, better password management and authentication and stuff like that. So we also saw we were recommending, for example, especially with the aspect of authentication, that two-factor authentication be like the default standard for cybersecurity. Yeah? So this essentially impacted employees who are not used to like using two-factor authentication. It might have been very difficult for them, but at the end of the day, it's much better than having just one-factor authentication. So yeah.
Thank you, Brian. I think you have just mentioned some of the things that we have also been talking about during this month. Just going back to basics and just ensuring that your digital hygiene is also quite good. I don't know if the other panelists have something to add. Maybe you can just unmute yourself and share.
Maybe I can add to what Brian has said. With regards to policies, I want to mention two things. First of all, I don't know, Brian, for the Brian and I sometimes we consult for some organizations, and one of the questions we ask is, do you have an internal security policy? And for the CSOs, most of the ones we've interacted with, they don't even have a pre-existing one, or if they do, it's very outdated. It was maybe created like 6-7 years ago when they first started out. So the issue of policy, it's a bit tricky, because then some organizations don't even have policies to begin with. But when it comes to the pandemic, I feel like the hardest bit for organizations, the hardest thing that they had to do is include offboarding security policies. So if people were laid off during the pandemic when they were still working remotely, how do you then offboard them in such a way that the company data, the organization's data still remains secure? These people don't have access to, you kick them out of the system so that they don't have access to, sensitive information, critical information. In some instances, you have disgruntled former employees. How do you mitigate that? So with regards to policies, we have been trying to encourage organizations to have a very comprehensive policy, because it's not just about your device or account. As Brian has mentioned, they had to update their travel policies, which some organizations didn't even have travel policies before the pandemic, but also including onboarding and offboarding policies. How do you onboard and offboard your employees so that your organization still remains secure? So yeah, so there's still a lot to be done in terms of policies, because I don't believe that most of the organizations, especially those that we've worked with, have had policies before even the pandemic.
I'd also like to add something on the same. So with recent the recent statistics, so with the security experts is before the security landscape for people, like we know, like the biggest threat to organizations is the people, especially when they're not cyber curious. But now with the working from home, the threat has become even bigger. And in a recent case that I handled, a particular individual did not understand what was happening with with their work computer, and that's because the people around him had, for some reason or another, had corrupted the machine, because this is the machine that the kid was using to do their online classes. This is the kids that the guests come in and still use the same Wi-Fi, so use the same laptop for one thing or another. And during that whole process of sharing the computer resource, we realized, like, when you're at work, the threat for you as an individual changed as compared to you being at home, because at work, it's you with your computer, and the network, the access points are protected, the Wi-Fi is segmented for guests, and for employees, there's MAC address. There's a lot of security that goes around you being within a company network. But then when you're at home, things have changed. Your service provider really doesn't care about security in most cases. So it's for you to actually go in the extra mile. And I think somebody mentioned the two-factor authentication. And this is things that didn't come up before COVID, that had to come up now with you being at home and with the Wi-Fi, and you being even a bigger threat to the company resources, because even on the home network, you're still accessing company resources one way or the other. Even if a VPN is involved and your computer is compromised, it still doesn't solve the issue. So I think that's also an added issue with the working from home that we noticed at a very alarming rate. And I thought I should put that in there. Thank you.
Oh, Shay, can I contribute?
Proceed, Sam. Karibu.
Thank you, Judy. I think you brought in a very, very interesting question, something that we had a very, very heated debate with some fellow subject matter experts in the industry. Working from home, working from home is like almost literally comparing it to bring your own devices to work, because it's your personal laptop. You don't know what it weighs. And I think Rola asked a question: do you have a security policy within your organization? So trying to marry those 3 points, it's becoming disastrous, because I would like to ask the audience in general, how many of you have set up some form of security even in your own personal devices at home, not even your own personal devices. How many of you have done some form of perimeter security within your home network? I know most of us are on Safaricom Fiber, most of us are on Zuku. You know, name any provider that you have there, Power Internet. You just put your laptop there, start browsing, access company information, do Gmail. Maybe let's just engage the crowd in a way or the other. That would be my first. It's a contribution, but in form of a question. To Alexis, you're online?
Yes, yes.
You raised a very important point about corporates, companies, small micro enterprises. People are moving to cloud services. And I think cloud services, cloud security is becoming a hit, even in the global heat map. We are seeing such a paradigm shift towards everyone adopting cloud. The physical infrastructure is dwindling by the day. You know, big servers. You know, people are doing a lot of thin clients. Maybe you're liking to just expound more on that in terms of cloud security. What would you advise? Can you have your own hybrid cloud form of setup even at your small enterprises at home without getting a threat attacking you? Maybe just expound bigger on that, because that's now touching on digital transformation when it comes to cloud security. So maybe first to the audience in terms of how you've protected yourself at home, and two, maybe to Alex. Thank you, Shay.
Maybe Alex, before you answer the question that had just been posed, to the audience, if you have a question, we'll be getting right into the Q&A session right after this, maybe 2 or 3 questions away. But in the meantime, utilize the chat and share your questions there. Yeah, Alexis, karibu.
Yeah, so coming back to the question of cloud security, as Samuel pointed out, it's something that's, again, increasing in prevalence in regards to attacks on cloud infrastructure, that being, cloud service providers like AWS, Azure, maybe a few other platforms. And then, of course, I think there are 2 ways of looking at this. Number one is the applications or the services being hosted within the cloud. And then, of course, the cloud infrastructure itself. I think, as I pointed out, in regards to the threats that we've seen on cloud infrastructure, one of them is, of course, targeting, things like S3 buckets, which we've seen quite a bit. And we've actually seen some of the issues associated with that. And in regards to implementing security for cloud infrastructure, I think in the case of AWS, I think what I would recommend, number one, is the process of creating accounts with the least privileges model, in that anyone or all the individuals who require access to AWS, for example, have been vetted, and you're actually following a policy that's based on who needs access to what. So the IAM identities should be set up accordingly in regards to what permissions users who have access to cloud platforms should actually be. So, for example, administrators should not have the same permissions as, or rather, a server administrator should not have the same permissions as the cloud architect, for example, and access to vital infrastructure corresponding to the cloud, like networking, VPCs, and for example, DNS should be restricted or essentially limited to the people who again need access to that, and that comes down to the process or to the concept of non-repudiation, which is something that we're also trying to implement for companies, in that there is a form of accountability with these platforms. So again, at the moment, companies are essentially operating in an ad hoc manner where everyone has access to the AWS control panel. They have the ability to terminate instances. They have the ability to modify hosted zones, for example. So I think, as I said, coming back to my first point, setting up permissions and access via the IAM identities or the IAM identities provided via AWS is very helpful. Secondly, we now are moving into the territory of securing the endpoints. So I think an assessment needs to be made on or in regards to the services that are being hosted on servers and their security, because if an application or a web application is compromised, then people or the attackers essentially gain access to the server. And furthermore, if you've not secured the servers within a VPC and you have other servers that are part of the internal network on AWS, then attackers will typically pivot to the other servers. So I think setting up security groups and VPCs based on based on the service the server is hosting is very important. And of course, endpoint security is very important. So vulnerability management, the fact that the security team should always be aware of the threats that are facing that application. They should be able to patch it, remediate any issues that are facing that application to prevent exploitation of the service and consequently the entire network. So just to summarize, because I know I've sort of gone on various tangents there, identities are a key part of cloud security, access to control panels, two-factor authentication, and then of course moving on to configuration of the servers and hardening of the servers, which I've covered quite a bit. So whenever you're setting up a Linux or Windows server within the cloud, I think you need to consider the security of the server. So you should be able to audit it, harden it, limit access to ports via a firewall, which AWS provides you or provides access for you. In regards to remote access or remote access of the server, there should be implementation of SSH key-based authentication as opposed to password authentication. So I think we sort of have two security concepts that are melding into one here when it comes down to the cloud. Number one, of course, is patch management and hardening of servers, and secondly, it all comes down to the CIA triad in cybersecurity, where you establish a system of confidentiality, integrity, and availability, and limiting access to cloud infrastructure as much as possible. So I think that's as much as I can go into right now without getting into any advanced techniques that we've seen but not really common.
Okay, thank you, Alexis, for answering that. Anyone in the audience who can maybe comment something about cloud security, how it's affecting cybersecurity, in terms of how is it improving pre and post-COVID? Audience, please.
As we're waiting for the audience to share their question on that, we've talked a lot about remote work, but we've not talked about rather remote work and working from home, but we've not also talked about how businesses are now having to shift their businesses online. I don't know if any of the panelists has anything to that they can share on that. Sam, you want to go first? Or Judy? Okay.
Yeah, I think this cuts across the point I had said on digital transformation. Companies trying to move their operations on a online or on a digital way that makes it easy for other people or for their employees or for their businesses and other clients, if it's a B2B or B2C kind of business, to be able to access the services. So this has very much impacted the product security and application security, which is my area, and in a good and a bad way, because yes, there's more targeted attacks on applications, to do more than they're supposed to do, and that's why you see things like bug bounty tend to solve one area of the problem, but then also we have expertise needed in building security into products if you start using, for instance, Docker, do you understand how to implement Docker security? Do you understand the threats that come with implementing Docker? So these are the kind of conversations you start to have with a team while they're trying to develop digital solutions to their customers or to their employees. And also in terms of data, with the compliance, I think I had mentioned this. If you're moving our product into another market, this app, does it comply? Does your business comply altogether to be operational in this company, in this country? And that is in terms of data security. This became a big, or I don't want to say a big thing or a huge thing, to guys working in application security, from doing the everyday VAPTs of a dynamic analysis. That was essentially our job, but then with COVID, this came in an idea of, we are building a product, this is the architecture, so please help us build security into this architecture. Even before we commence what we are doing, we are going to host this on cloud where the security come in. We are going to be in this market. How do we handle data at this point? Can we build security in this? How do we build it so that it's not a bottleneck for our product? We really need it, but we also want to we want to build the product at the end of the day, but security needs to be an essential part of it. And I think recently we were building an architecture for a product, and it took us 6 months before even anything commenced, for just breaking down the product security, because the company had built the architecture without security in mind. It was gonna come in as an afterthought, as part of QA, that's quality assurance. But then they had to come back and say, so Judy, we have this architecture, we wanna build this product, this is how it's gonna work, but we've not thought of security. Please help us build security into this. Where do we plug security into this? How do we automate this? How do we create security into the pipelines? Because security is a thing now. We are not building without security. And I think those are very good conversations to have right now. Yeah.
Awesome, Judy. I see there's someone with a question on or wants to contribute on cloud security. Emmanuel?
Yeah, thanks. Emmanuel here, Emmanuel Chebukati, taking this call from Kigali. I just wanted to add on the cloud section. I work at Hepta Analytics, a company I co-founded, and we do a lot of data work with clients across the region. And part of doing that data work involves securing the data before we analyze, and we work across various cloud providers. So I just wanted to emphasize on the cloud, particularly the concept of the shared responsibility model, especially as we look into cybersecurity awareness. People need to understand that there are some things that the cloud provider is responsible for, some things that you are responsible for, and some things that are shared. And this varies across the various, the cloud deployment models on the cloud. So if you're looking at an IaaS or infrastructure as a service kind of setup, then you need to manage pretty much, the entire stack or the entire server. In a platform as a service scenario, perhaps you're looking at a point and click in terms of setting up security policies. And then in a software as a service, you're looking at setup and account management. So as we look into cybersecurity awareness, it's important to share with people that just because you've said we've moved to the cloud doesn't automatically guarantee you that security. You still need to play your part in line with the cloud deployment model that you're using and the shared responsibility model of the cloud.
Thank you, Emmanuel, for your insight from Kigali, Rwanda. Just moving things a bit, we're almost coming to the end of this Q&A session. Just 2 more questions. One is about gender inequality in cybersecurity and how we can improve that. And I like that the panel is a bit balanced for the first time ever. But maybe the panelists can contribute on how is there gender inequality in general in cybersecurity? How can we improve it? And my last question to the panel is laws around data protection and how some of this has been breached. So let me start with the ladies. Laura, as the leader of SheHacks, tell us about gender inequality.
I don't know. I like to look at it more like an imbalance, not really an inequality, an imbalance in that unfortunately we don't have is it the 2/3 rule in cybersecurity? So there's not really inequality, but an imbalance in how even the workforce is, the workplace, there are more men than women, but it is not really the fault of, let's say, the companies hiring or people in power, not really. I feel like this is more of a cultural thing because from a very young age, you have been told like this is for men and this is for women. So gender roles have already been assigned. By the time you're reaching to high school, when you're told to, let's say, select your courses that you want to pursue, your relatives will tell you as a girl to take something that is more social, less technical. So for me, it's an imbalance because of the way our society is set up traditionally, and also the way gender roles have been assigned. But thankfully, slowly but surely, we are bridging the gender gap in the industry. I feel like the inequality comes in with in terms of pay, but that is not, I don't have any data to support that, just from conversations with friends. So for me, the inequality comes in pay, but generally it's more of an imbalance.
Thanks, Laura. Judy?
Sure, thanks, Shay. So when it comes to, that is true. If you work in a cybersecurity, if you're a practitioner and you tend to work with a lot of companies, you will start to see, you'll actually start to feel the gender inequality or imbalance, as Laura said, and that's I don't think there is any state or any country that they are not actually trying to solve this issue. It's a global problem. But then I think I'm seeing that women are becoming a bit more aggressive in getting such roles and getting into the tech space. And I don't think there's a better time for guys than now to be in the tech space, especially for women, when you're trying to balance it out within companies. And then just know that as much as you're trying to balance, there's a competition on the talent. Do you have the talent? Sure. Okay, so you and let's say you, Gladys, and you, James, you have the same tech talent. I'm sorry to say this, but if the company is trying to achieve the equality and you both have the same talent, Gladys might be picked first to bridge that gap. But then if James is more skilled, then this Gladys it doesn't become an issue anymore. And I think that's where we're still not there yet. I want to say that because I've seen massive talent. I was in Dakar the other day and there was this hackathon that was so amazing and the women were doing such amazing work. And I think we've seen the same even in Cyber Girls in Nigeria. Amazing work that these girls are doing. And you can even see what they're trying to do on Try Hack Me, a lot of technical skills, because as soon as you admit the issue or the challenge you have and you're trying to fix that, you actually get to close the gap. And I think there's communities that are doing that, and I really appreciate that. It's even WASEC on the same thing. And I would say we are actually somewhere as compared to like 3 years ago when some of us were joining the industry. It's getting better. We are still not there yet, but it's getting better. And also, yeah, even in terms, as she said, in terms of pay, you need to be a bit more aggressive on how you negotiate on the table on the next pay for you, because that's I think that's a more personal than it is on the gender. But then, you know, on a personal level, on women, there's a lot of things behind the negotiation table. And I think somebody mentioned this, that when a man negotiates, when he's negotiating for himself, he tends to be a bit more aggressive. But when a woman negotiates for himself, it's not as the aggression, but when the woman negotiates for her and the family, you cannot outmatch her. So I think this is a personal thing, negotiating on the pay, but on the skill set, this needs to be everybody. There's too many places you can actually bridge this and do your due diligence and get the necessary skills that you need to, and then I'll come to the table and say, these are my skill sets, this is what I'm doing, this is what I can do for you, this is the value, and this needs to be the thing you need to bring into the company when you're doing the interview. This is the value I can bring to the company because this is where you are and this is what I can bring, and this is how much the market value for my talent is. And I think now this becomes a different kind of conversation with the employer. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Judy. You're doing amazing work at WASEC. Brian, I don't know if you have experienced this gender imbalance at your organization, and maybe you can also share with us how you guys are dealing with it. Brian?
Hi. Okay. From what I've seen at the organization, or rather at the organizations that I work for, with respect to gender, they've been sort of laying down, sort of like they've been creating committees and task forces within people at work to ensure that we are recruiting more people, like, for example, BIPOC, for example, like black and colored people and stuff like that. We are recruiting more people from, you know, the LGBTQ communities, and we are recruiting in a way that is fair and non-discriminatory, even for people with disabilities as well. So I really like where the world is headed, where we really factor in the fact that everybody's voice and everybody's presence is actually important, and it's important to bring all these different voices to the table for the betterment of the community. I feel like there's still so much work to be done, especially at these multiple intersections. For example, the gender inequality, especially with regards to not only the LGBTQ, but also just women in general, and just also having more Black people in some of these higher up spaces where some of the real decisions are made. But I generally think we are heading in the right direction, and we constantly just have to keep on claiming these spaces. If they won't give us a seat, we'll just take it, you understand? So I think it's important to also have that mentality shift as well.
Thanks, Brian.
Okay.
For Alexis, yep.
In fact, I just want to contribute on this issue of gender. I like how Laura and Judy brought it about. And we even want to start right away home, and we start right away from this particular conference. Taking into account you are the one who has been organizing this, it's right at home. Look at the changes that have been happening. Look at the top gun in the industry. Someone like Ning Wang, the offensive security CEO, and all of us know that body. I was trying to peruse through the cybersecurity cybercrime magazine. I actually saw so many organizations that are led by women, and we actually saw She Hacks has been mentioned there. You know, so many things. Ladies of London Hacking Society. I saw something like the League of Women in Cybersecurity Society. You will also admit about WSEC. So I believe there has been some good balance in the past, and even in the recent ongoing security. Look at also the way we used to do Africa Hackon conferences and even the way we are doing now. The panelists were like half ladies, half men. So there's that gender balance. Brian mentioned about LGBTQ, whereby I believe everyone will be able to understand what those initials means, and they are being incorporated slowly in the industry. So yeah, the world is heading to a positive end. Okay.
Thank you, Sam. Alexis, you have something to say?
Yeah, I think probably just so sort of give my view on it. I think there definitely is gender inequality, and I think it's at least in my experience an issue of perception, not really talent. In that this issue or inequality is being fostered by the fact that there's a perceived notion of women in tech and in cybersecurity, and I think a way of tackling this and the way that I've been trying to tackle this is through awareness, right? In that, we should start showcasing women in the industry and success stories. And again, there are plenty of that. And I think that is one of the key aspects or one of the key ways I think we can sort of, sort this issue out with. So I think, as I said, coming back to my main point, it's really an issue of perception and not talent, because I think we all know that there's extremely talented women in the field, and the way we can go about, changing the narrative is by, showcasing these women and their skills. And the way we handle it, or our policy really, is that we are focused on competency and not gender. So we put competency and skills before anything else. And we do not, discriminate, on any type of terms, whether it be racial, gender, age, etc. So I think that, I think that companies need to change their recruitment policies based on that. And I think there should be a focus on skills as opposed to, any of the factors that I've just mentioned. And I think that for companies that have adopted that view and that strategy, you find that there is a more natural fostering or a natural formation of a workforce that is diverse in regards to gender, in regards to race, in regards to age. And if that is the way that companies go into it, then I think the outcome will be even more positive than we've seen right now. So yeah, I think you guys are doing a fantastic job, and I think it's great. I really like the direction things are going in, and I'm really excited to see where we actually end up in the future.
Thank you, Alexis. I'm seeing a hand raised from Michael. You can unmute yourself and share your question.
Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Michael?
You can't hear Michael. Michael?
Excuse, am I audible or?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
But raise your volume a bit. Raise your volume a bit.
Okay, let me increase the volume. So on matters equality, especially when it comes to gender, race, and those characteristics, the issue here is usually not about, in the past it was marginalization, but nowadays when it comes to equality, especially when it comes to STEM fields, this is usually a matter of interests. And when you compare them with egalitarian societies that consider equality above all other attributes in terms of when it comes to selection, in terms of assigning responsibility and stuff like that, especially when it comes to STEM fields. There was a research that was done by the University of Toronto for over a decade that showed that when it comes to STEM fields, the more egalitarian the society is, the more the deviation from when it comes to gender, STEM fields, and also when it comes to maybe race and sports. Now, it's a good thing that SheHacks has done when it comes to creating interest in terms of cybersecurity. It's a very good thing. But we should also understand that when it comes to competencies and expertise, it's one thing to create an interest in the field, and it's another thing to select people in terms of there must be 30% of slots assigned to a specific group of people. And if you do that, what you'll end up with is people who are less competent in a particular area than other people who are more deserving. Now, when it comes to the STEAM areas, areas in terms of STEAM, and especially when it comes to cybersecurity, to be specific, what should be done is that there should be, you should champion people, especially women, to pick up cybersecurity, to learn about cybersecurity, to become experts in the field. Then from there, when it comes to the selection process, when it comes to assigning responsibilities, it will be much easier to get an expert within the female gender or from any particular race, rather than trying to assign a slot based on equity. Equality and equity usually is solved when it comes to the interest level in terms of training, awareness, and competency building, skill building. Now, when that area is already covered, it will not be a difficult thing to have a large number of female experts. So the field, as people, when people are saying that the field is marginalized, that is scientifically it's a wrong approach to say the field is marginalized because of people are not being given opportunities. Nowadays, SheHacks has done a very good job, and there are a lot of slots that are being given when it comes to equality, especially when it comes to gender, and locally also when it comes to tribe. That is what has been done when it comes to assignment of responsibilities and positions. However, in order for us to be able to have the best skills being given the positions, we need to create interest within those particular areas of the people who are marginalized, have them trained well enough, become competent enough, and that way, when it comes to selecting people, when it comes to assigning responsibilities or selection of roles, it will not be much of an issue that we can say that this is people are marginalized because of ABCD. If we do that, we'll end up creating a loop back whereby we say a group is marginalized, we assign slots. Especially look at it also in terms of tribe. We say this tribe is marginalized, we give slots within that tribe. And then the people that are given those slots, most of them you find that they're not up to par with the rest of the group. And then when it comes to that problem, again, it creates the same issue in terms of skill, the lack of skill. So what should be done is that the skill level, at the training level, that is where you should impact in terms of ensure that the people that are selected or the people who have interests within that particular area are trained well enough to be sufficiently qualified and proper experts within the field, so that when it comes to assigning roles and responsibilities, it will not be an issue of there's lack of skill because of ABCD. No, it will be we have enough competent people. There is no problem in selecting people for a particular role, and as expertise increase, or as more people become experts, the level of expertise will also increase. So also when you look at it in terms of like in sports, the more the number of fast runners, the faster the fastest man will ever be. So if you try to reduce when it comes to selection, because you want to create a balance, you'll always result to a compromise in the quality. So my opinion is when it comes to balance, focus on creating interest in the field and then training those who are interested to the best of your ability so that they can become the best people available. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Michael. Very passionate about the topic. And I know if we start getting into the details of this, we might not exhaust everything that there is to say about this particular topic. It's very sensitive. Yeah, so my last question to the panel and also to the attendees, if you have any questions, please raise your hand or you can chatters in the chat box. So my last question is, talk to us about the laws around data protection and how this has been breached. Brian, you want to go first? You were telling us about misinformation in your article, so.
Okay. Yeah, so as I think as we all know, for example, in Kenya, we have the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act. We have the Data Protections Act. In Europe, we have the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. And I think they're also working on something called the DSA, which is essentially the Digital Services Act that will essentially help a lot with matters revolving around like platform accountability, especially for big tech companies such as Google and Facebook. But with respect to Kenya, for example, we constantly see like a breach in our privacy and our security. Like two of the recent examples I can think of is one, when KRA intentionally or unintentionally sort of leaked the KRA PIN numbers of people, of more than 1,000 people on their website. And you see like a KRA PIN number is something that essentially is your personally identifiable information. So this was actually very, very unfortunate of them. And I feel like they actually breached the Data Protection Act, and they really exposed those people they leaked their data to so many forms of cybersecurity threats. That was essentially KRA doxing these people. And even recently, we saw that, I don't know if you guys remember, but there's a time it was trending on Twitter how people were being registered to parties, and they have never even interacted with these parties. They're essentially not members of these parties, but they were finding themselves in these parties. And one of the reasons why I think this keeps happening is because this is a problem that essentially revolves around, I think, one, data governance. And in Kenya, we really need like a holistic approach to ensure data governance for privacy, confidentiality, and compliance. Because, for example, if you look at how most data governance frameworks are being implemented in Kenya, they mostly focus on protective measures, especially with a focus on privacy. So it's always, this information cannot be found, it will be secure. And even if you look at the conversations around Huduma number, it was mostly around data privacy. But one very underrated and important aspect of a holistic approach for data governance, for privacy, confidentiality, and compliance is that, one, we really have to ensure that we are preserving and enforcing the choices that we as the users of these certain platforms have made. So for example, if my data is only to be processed by Teams, is there a way in which there's a protective measure that ensures no other platform on eCitizen can access this data other than Teams, for example? So I think that's I think that's very important. And we have to go a step further to ensure that we preserve and enforce the choices, individuality, or rather the choices that we have made with respect to how and when our personal information may be collected, processed, and potentially shared with third parties. So in the context where you are consenting to your data being processed a certain way, you have this information. And I feel like this is something that especially lacks in most platforms and data governance models being implemented in the country. Yeah, that's what I can say for now. Mic check.
Thank you, Brian. I don't know if there's anyone else in the panel who would like to share their insights on data protection laws.
Yes, I would
Judy?
like to say something, sure.
Sure.
Yeah, so I think as a country, we still haven't gotten or grasped the aspect of, how much our data is, is out there, or how sensitive it is, and how much of it do we need to give. I think as a country, we have prioritized convenience over privacy and security when it comes to data. So like, for instance, why would you be allowing if you're downloading an app, a torch, I think this is around, and then it's asking for permission to access your contact list. And I'm like, okay, sure, no. And the fact that without this permission allowed, you cannot access the resource. For you feel like no convenience. Sorry, this is inconvenient for me. So what are they gonna do with my contact list? So you prioritize convenient over privacy and security. And as a country, if the mindset that we have will not even allow us to be able to come up with policies and stick to them and say, we need to be our data privacy. We need to have, if Microsoft is here, if Facebook is here, they need to make sure our data is just processed within the country. Why do we need it outside there? What else is necessary? And I think the one issue that really, really got to me was when we used to go to M-Pesa, and you had to write your name down with your card, with your ID number. And it's a few days, as I think Brian said, you're registered into parties and you don't know how you got into them. You're getting weird text messages from, I don't know who, promotions, marketing. I have seen how people acquire leads on leads for marketing using phone numbers. The ways are very unscrupulous. Just trust me, it's really, really not good. And these guys at the gate, when you get into buildings and you have to write down your information with your ID number, and you can't even question them on what are you going to do with this data. And I think this was all over Twitter on how they sell these books to search parties. When it gets to an election year, they have a database of so many people. So you have a team that does data entry of this data, and then this data is reused for something else that it should not be used for. And and as a country, we are so used to just doing that because you just want to get into the building. For you, your convenience is being, it's not, you don't want to say no. For me, convenience is not a priority. I want to know why do you need my ID number? And as Kenyans, we all know your ID number is connected to everything: your employment, your NHIF, your medicals, your passport. Your ID number is ideally your identity, but then it's the one information that you keep distributing everywhere, and you're not even sure why you're doing it. You're just doing it because it's what everybody else is doing it. And these small things cannot be tackled if you don't even understand or bring up the issue of what are you doing with this. If it comes up somewhere and then 2 people, 3 people, come up with the same issue, you start to get to understand or talk about this issues of privacy, of my data. What are you doing with my data? Why do you need my phone number? No. I will not provide you my phone number. And I don't know if people do this. When I'm buying a product online and they ask for my phone number and they ask for my email, I will give one. And if it's a must that I provide the other one, I don't provide unless I actually really need that. I prioritize security or privacy over convenience. And that's because I have seen what the data is used for. And I think this is the point where we need to get as a country. I am not sure about the other, most parts of the world, apart from what really I keenly see here in Kenya, with how much we distribute our information without even realizing that we are entitled to some data privacy and security. Yeah, thank you.
Shay, I have a point, but I'm gonna keep it short because I know we are out of time. I think when it comes to data, the biggest culprits, yes, are the big organizations that share, get your data, and you don't know what happens to your data. But citizens of this country have also been guilty of sharing personal data. If you see on social media, bloggers are sharing personal identifiable information of people. We have journalists who have been victims of doxing by known people. We have, for example, we have groups such as Facebook groups that are used to expose conmen or something like that, and then they end up exposing their details, their addresses, their names, their ID numbers, all that information. So what happens when you're a victim of that? If you're an organization, you have been a victim of a data breach. We have the data protection laws, but then what next? What comes next? You have already, let's say, suffered financial loss because of this. Do you have a cyber liability insurance? How many people in this country are talking about cyber liability insurance? So there's so much the law can do, but also personal responsibility in terms of, yes, we can pursue the law if, let's say, my data has been breached, but then how am I going to get the compensation I deserve? That's where the insurance comes in. So for me, I feel like the law is one element in an entire ecosystem where so many different elements should come together to ensure that your data as an individual and as an organization is protected. And I feel like that is a conversation that needs to be had with the different stakeholders.
Thanks, Laura. I was personally a victim of what Brian mentioned about being registered at a party that I did not register for. And it's a bit disappointing that even to resign from that party, that I have to write a letter to be unregistered party, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. But that is the information that I got. I like how Judy mentioned that we should prioritize convenience over, sharing information. And I've also seen this even on our own social accounts where someone is saying, I want to, when they're inquiring for something, this is my email, or this is my phone number, call me, or reach out to me, and this is straight up on your timeline. So I think these are the kind of conversations that we need to normalize having, knowing when and where to share this personal identifiable information. And with that, I think I've come to the end of that section. I'll go straight into the questions that are in the chat. If there's anyone on YouTube also with any question, please do share. There's a question here from James to Brian or Laura. How do you protect a company's data from being shared by employees who work from home and are disgruntled employees?
Laura, can I take it, or do you want to take it?
You can take it, no problem.
Okay, so what Laura and I normally tell these civil society organizations that we work with regards to disgruntled employees is that it's a process that essentially, when you're speaking to your employees, it's a process that starts all the way from an onboarding all the way to offboarding. So for example, one of the main things you have to do when you're onboarding an employee is that you have to sort of set a tone of compliance very early. So essentially, you need to require, or you need to ensure that the employees sign non-disclosure agreements that would essentially prevent them from leaking any information, especially when they leave your company. And as an organization, you constantly have to remind your employees that it's the responsibility to keep company's data confidential. And I think earlier today, Alexis spoke of the principles of least privilege. So one of the most effective ways to sort of safeguard a company's sensitive data is to sort of limit what each employee can access. based on what they need to sort of perform their job. So one thing you have to understand is that the more unnecessary access available in your company's system/platforms, the more opportunity there is for security breaches. So you constantly have to be very careful about who is accessing what data/information in the platform. And another thing organizations have to do as well is they constantly have to ensure that they have like up-to-date safeguards, and they also provide training for its employees to prevent especially unintended disclosure of confidential information. And normally this sort of feeds into like the cybersecurity training policy and also the organizational security policy document. So they sort of work in tandem to ensure that employees are given, or rather empowered, to understand how to prevent unintended or intended disclosure of confidential information. And as for onboarding, one thing we sort of realize, and the trend that is very, very visible, is that most disgruntled employees in most instances normally breach companies' information after they leave the company, or sort of like immediately after. And I think Laura spoke about this today. It's that you have to establish like an offboarding policy document as well, and policy system as well, offboarding system, where essentially you terminate an employee's credentials immediately upon their departure to prevent unauthorized access to your platforms. So I feel like once you employ some of these things we've talked about, you'll be at a much better position as opposed to an organization that does not do any of these things. But at the end of the day, when someone is disgruntled and they have access, there's really not much you can do to prevent them from leaking the information.
Thanks, Brian. Laura, is there anything that you want to add on to that?
Brian has covered most of it, but what I'd like to say, and I talked about it in the previous point I was mentioning, is once the data is out there, if let's say you've been a victim of a data breach, make sure you have a cyber insurance, a liability insurance. That way you will be compensated for any financial loss. And as much as it has already happened, you still get some sort of compensation if you as an organization are victim of a data breach.
Thanks, Laura. The next question is from Kibue. Is LGBTQ a disability? Why would preference be given here? I think this was around what Brian had mentioned, and inclusivity. I think the question has been answered in the chat. Kibwe, if you're still there, maybe you can tell us if the question has been answered sufficiently. You can unmute yourself, I believe.
It has. Hi guys. What the way Brian was putting it was like, if there should be preference given for somebody who chooses to do whatever they wish in their bedroom. The same way like somebody who has a physical or medical disability. And that was my bone of contention. Okay, we've gone through it in the chat there with some guys, and yes, we are not, or rather, I'm not going for discrimination at all or any form of exclusivity. But like Brian was trying to put it, like we need to prioritize anybody in that sector of the community. And certainly that's not the case. you know, it's a choice. It's not a form of disability at all.
I agree, Kibwe. It's not a disability, it's a choice. Brian, you have something to share with Kibwe?
Maybe also, I think sometimes context is very, very important. And when people say marginalized, in my head, I think of people who are, you know, historically excluded. And I'm a firm believer, actually, that, you know, you have to sort of, when you're designing products or when you're building in technology, you have to design with excluded and diverse communities and not for them. And one thing we sort of realized is that most of the software engineers from the past were like white. And even if you look at most of the data that is currently being used to train artificial intelligence systems, they're actually very biased. So by essentially building for these communities instead of building with them, there is a very high probability that, you know, you may be building so many biases into the platform itself. And I think it's it's honestly very important to ensure that when you're building a product or when you're working in technology, that all these different perspectives are effectively captured and everyone is given a seat at the table to contribute and meaningfully participate when it comes to bringing things to life, especially things that will essentially be used by everyone. And that's why I'm saying it's very, very important to factor in. It's not like it's a preference or a priority, but it's something that I feel should be done. Like we should be designing and with these communities as opposed to designing for them. And that's the hill I choose to die
on. There you're going kind of neutral, Brian. In one sentence you're saying not preference, then in the other you're saying design for, you know. And that again, we go back to the point again. It's really a matter of a personal choice. If you decide to go and sleep with cows, but don't expect or industry should not cater for guys who decide to do this or that in their bedrooms or out in the cow field. It should not. There is inclusivity, yes, but not any form of preference, not any form of condescending, just because you have made this or that choice. You know, you see the way, Brian, you're putting it is like we need to address when we're doing systems or when we're doing policy, we still need to address that these guys have their needs. Yes, but not in the workplace. If somebody has a need, it's probably a guy on a wheelchair or on crutches, but not a guy who does things with cows in the fields. That's my kind of point.
Thanks, Kibwe. I think gender and sexuality is a very sensitive topic that unfortunately we cannot dive into. I hope Brian has noted your comments, same to the panelists and to the attendees. And yeah, we definitely cannot expound this, and maybe we should have a debate about it sometime in the future. I don't know. Yeah, I see another question from Bradley, coming from a business process automation perspective. How do you sensitize or emphasize to clients who run their own on-prem or cloud environment on security? Can I throw this to Alexis, please?
Yeah, sure. So the way we approach this, and if I understand the question correctly, is how we essentially go about demonstrating the importance of security for companies who have on-premises servers and cloud infrastructure. The way we do this is we essentially provide adversary emulation demonstrations for the company or to the company, in that we take them through the process of essentially showing them how their infrastructure can be compromised, whether it be on premises, whether it be through employees and social engineering and the cloud infrastructure. So I think, and this is a strategy that has worked very well for us. If we actually, can show the client or the individual what is likely to happen, and that's why we go for adversary emulation, where we utilize techniques and tactics that are frequently used by APT groups or by hacking groups. We can actually give them an accurate representation of the threat they're likely to face, and test their defenses, test their ability to defend against these attacks. And again, we're essentially emulating this, so we're not really going for any destruction or exfiltration of data. We're essentially showing them what can happen or what could possibly happen. And I think that that's probably one of the best ways you can go about doing it, because if they see it themselves, then it becomes much more real, as opposed to essentially explaining threats via a slideshow.
All right, we're almost coming to the end of this session. Last but not least, we have a question from Maxwell on YouTube. Thank you, Maxwell, for joining us there. How is the Kenya Data Protection Act being affected today, or being effected today? Brian? Brian, are you there? Or Judith, can you share your sentiments on this? How has it been affected?
Sure. I think Brian has dropped off. So the Data Protection Act of Kenya is, I went through it, it's a very funny document. I think the idea behind the act itself was, a very innocent act, trying to just deal with the fact that we're moving into a digital space. We have M-Pesa, which is getting a global view. We have companies like Microsoft, Google setting up here, and how do we actually protect our people from data? So how do we protect our Kenyan citizens? Because we are not under EU, we don't have the GDPRs. So what is there for us to have or to use, so that we can show that we have something that protects our users? I think that was I think that was a thought process. The implementation, however, is in the way it's being affected is there are more people, and this is from a personal view, maybe somebody can say something different, is you see most companies in Kenya, as much as we have the Data Protection Act that has these policies, these annex that guide how to treat data, most companies are still opting for the ISO 27001, and you'd wonder why, because it's actually more pricey to acquire the ISO than to deal with the Data Protection Act. And it's the policies, the controls, the annex are a bit less on the act. I don't know, I haven't seen it in full effect. Maybe when data is breached, when you hear a company in Kenya the data was leaked at this point, first of all, they don't even publish it, which they should, to let their users know that yes, something has happened, but we are working towards it. And when they do, you don't actually see a lot of legal on it. You're like, okay, so what, it was hacked, we move on. As I said, we Kenyan people prioritize convenience over, privacy and security, and I don't think it has the effect it should have, and that is because we don't understand the act itself and what it's supposed to do and how it's supposed to protect us as Kenyans and as businesses from actually even transacting with companies outside, our landscape, our East Africa. How do we actually protect ourselves? Because businesses only interact with businesses when there's something to be gained from both ends. Okay, so Google is coming in, they're giving us this for free. Like the other day, Netflix is doing something for free. I'm not sure what exactly, but I know there's something they're doing for free. And you have to ask yourself this question, okay, fine, it's free. Okay, so why is it free? Because when something is free, you're the product. Okay, and then that your data is the product. You as a customer, you're the product. So how do they actually, as much as you're accessing this, how do you protect yourself? And the act is supposed to come in and do that for its Kenyan people. But I don't see it full effect. I don't see it effect as it should, or as I think it should be used or considered by the Kenyan businesses, organizations, and the general public at large. Yeah.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you so much. So we've come to the end of this particular session for now. Okay, last minute question. Is there any use? Maxwell, you want to unmute yourself and ask your question, please? We are winding up, Maxwell, so please unmute yourself. And shoot your question. We need to end the session. Judy, you can see the question. You want to add on to it? Laura, maybe also?
All right, I think he's asking, is there any use of having the act in that case? Because you already engaged the security professionals, that's the CID and SIS, in case of any major cyber attacks. I think there is a use for it, Maxwell. It's just that the effect or how guys are using it is what needs to change. It's like some companies, e.g. in Greece, you can't provide a service SAS, software as a service, without being ISO 27001 compliant. It's a business requirement. The way it's affected is what's different. We do need the policy. We actually need to amend it so that it can incorporate a lot of things. But then in the way we use it as organizations, the way we affect it in companies, on the people or on third parties, the new, the big five coming to the country, is what we need to, take a step back and start to ask ourselves, how do we actually engage this act? Thanks.
Thanks, Judy. With that, I think we have come to the end of the session. I'm just going to invite the panelists to share their their final thoughts on the subject and how, we can better ourselves, create awareness and so on and such. Laura, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Shay. This has been a very, very insightful session. I'm so happy because finally we're having conversations around cybersecurity, because we have ways to go as a country, as a continent, as companies, as individuals. And having these conversations, it opens up this platform where people can understand why cybersecurity is important and how they can go about to strengthen their cybersecurity posture, whether it's for their organization or even their personal security. So yes, thank you so much to ICRAL Innovation Hub and to my fellow panelists and the keynote speaker, Sam. And I hope that we will continue engaging in the future. Thank you.
Awesome. We are happy to host you too. Judy?
Sure. Thank you so much. Thanks for even reaching out. I love when we have such candid conversations, and the fact that they're being heard and the context is so good. It means that we are moving into the right direction, and I like that. Sorry, and I think most of us appreciate that. Being in the cybersecurity industry, especially those who've been here longer. I know like Sam has been around for like 13 years, and you can actually see milestones. Guys, okay, now they are talking about this. Back then there was nothing like the Data Protection Act. Now there is one. Now we can talk about how to fix that. So there is actual milestones, and I think I want to tell everybody, even who joined, those who are in the panel, and really appreciate, and thanks so much. Thanks, Shay.
Thank you, Judy. Amazing work that you're also doing. If you don't know her, then my friend, you need to bring yourself up to speed. Yes, Sam is a veteran. Sam, you have something to share with us?
I think for me, first of all, is to thank the audience, because without the audience, then this particular conference would not have been. So to the audience, thank you very much even for giving us all your time. To ICRAL, we want to thank ICRAL for giving us this platform. And even for ICRAL partners, Think Cyber, IC Council, Analytics, AH, all those partners that are on board. We thank you very much. Even to Alexis, Hackersploit, quite an incentive there, and we are glad to have you on board. I think the takeaway note would be smart, be safe. That has been the theme for the whole of the month, awareness month, and we look forward to being the cyber evangelist security we are. Judy, I'm a bit young. 13 years, so
yes.
Yeah, just on a light note.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Sam is officially a teenager. Brian, you have something to share with us?
I think Sam, Laura, and Judy have really captured everything. Mine is just to thank ICRAL Innovation Hub, to thank all the panelists for showing up for this session. Places where people can share best practices, learn from each other, and maybe just share skills or whatever. I think it's very important, and I was so honored to be here today.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. Definitely happy to have you back. If you didn't know, Brian is also a graduate of the National Cybersecurity Training Program, Cohort 1, and he's doing so many good things in the space that he is in. Last but not least, this is a guy who needs no introduction. If you don't know him, you definitely should. He has over, I don't know, 500,000 subscribers on YouTube and a training academy. Alexis, your final thoughts?
Thank you, Shay. And I just wanted to say thank you to ICRAL for setting this up, as well as all the partners involved in, again, fostering this. This was definitely a great conversation. It was a pleasure, to be a part of the panel. And I, really appreciated all the points and the various talking points made by all the panelists. So thank you very much. Discussions like this are very important in fostering a healthy cybersecurity community, and it was really a pleasure to be a part of this. And hopefully, as we move on into the future, we can have even more discussions like this. And I think we're on the correct path to, building a very good, cybersecurity presence, internationally. So, that's something that I'm really, really pushing for. And it was, a pleasure meeting everyone. And as I said, hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Thank you, Alexis. Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Laura, Brian. Thank you, Sam. And thank you, everyone who took out a few minutes of their time to, join this conversation and discuss about how cybersecurity has really affected us. not just as cybersecurity professionals, but even in various ways that we could not imagine of. There are some realities of this world that didn't exist 5 years ago, and 5 years is probably far too long ago. Say 1 year or 2 years ago, we have seen that in the news and in the headlines in recent years, they have spawned the fear of cyber attacks, causing businesses to put up or improve their cybersecurity posture. So we are definitely happy to be part of this conversation where we are trying to increase our awareness around cybersecurity. And not just that, but also the careers that are available in this industry. Thank you once again. That brings us to the end of this session and the end of the Cybersecurity Awareness Month. If you're interested to see or hear what we have been doing during this month, you can head over to our YouTube channel. There's a whole playlist of all the events that took place. I know also SheHacks had a couple of events around this. You can also visit their YouTube page and you will be able to see their playlists. I don't know if there's, and with that, I think we can end this session. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. Be cyber smart and stay safe online. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Shay.
Bye.